Hello, we're going to look at an opening system against the English opening today, and in particular when white doesn't play an immediate g3 and bishop g2. So here's an example move sequence which would transpose into the English opening. After knight f3, knight f6, if white plays c4 here. Now you may be uncomfortable with this type of position, and I'm going to recommend a system which David Howell has been using with great success in the Olympiad games which are currently being played. Basically, he plays g6 as though he's going to play a normal King's Indian setup, maybe with bishop g7, castles and d6. However, after white plays knight c3, if as black you did continue with bishop g2, well, basically you're giving white a lot of options here in the English opening. First of all, to play just the immediate g3, which would carry on white's strategy of increasing the pressure on this d5 square. If this bishop is fianchettoed, then white has a very nice game sometimes, just castling and maybe stretching out on the queen side with a later a3, rook b1 and b4. So really, if you want to take the fight to white at an early stage, you could actually consider something different here to the bishop g7 move. And in fact, psychologically, I think it's a good idea, this move, which I'm going to recommend. It's an early d5. Now, when you play d5 normally, if whites have played d4, it sort of transposes into the Grunfeld system. And this still could transpose into the Grunfeld system if, for example, c takes d5, knight takes d5, and if white played d4, but this is outside of the scope of the video, but the Grunfeld was employed by Kasparov against Karpov with great success, and it's a reasonably good dynamic opening. But anyway, if white doesn't transpose it back into a Grunfeld, white has another aggressive try which we're going to focus on in this video, which is this move queen a4 check. So how would you face this? Well, David Howell has shown that you can actually face it by simply playing bishop d7, and here there's a couple of moves that white might try. White might try queen d4 or queen h4, for example. Let's have a look at queen h4. So queen h4. So as black, how would you continue here? Would you try and play knight takes c3, or would you try and reinforce the knight or move it back? Well, let's follow an illustrative game now. So this is one of Howell's games in the Olympiad in round 2. And he played actually bishop c6, and his opponent, Schandorf, representing the Denmark national team, played the aggressive knight e5 here. So as black, how would you proceed here? Would you voluntarily give up your light squared bishop? Well, actually Howell did so. He played actually bishop g7, and after knight takes c6, knight takes c6, black has a kind of lead in development. He's got rid of his his light squared bishop issue, and after e3, black castled. After bishop e2, played e6, offering the trade of queens. Now here white played queen a4, again losing a little bit of time, and now David played knight c e7, so he's unblocking his c-pawn to be able to strike at the white centre if white plays d4. And in fact white did play d4, and now this central counter-strike c5 was played. After knight takes d5, knight takes d5, David's opponent actually took on c5, and there was a major flaw with this. I wonder if you can spot it. I'll give you 5 seconds. The major flaw was the move knight c3, so a bolt from the blue. A beautiful tactic. So if b takes c3, then bishop takes c3, king moves, then bishop takes a1, and black is doing fine, material up. So after this knight c3, in fact white played queen b4, and the king was stranded in the centre now. After knight takes e2, king takes e2, David immediately put more pressure on white's position by playing queen g5, hitting both g2 and the c5 pawn. So after g3 now rook ac8, and white's in quite a passive position here, and his bishop is also not looking very good. He tries to develop it now with bishop d2, but after rook takes c5, David's prepared to sack the b pawn because he's got very active rooks and a dangerous bishop and dangerous queen. So after queen takes b7, look at white's lack of development. Queen g4 check was played, and after queen f3 now queen c4 check, and after king e1 now bishop takes b2, so gaining back some material. But furthermore, after rook d1, rook d8, the d2 bishop is under great pressure. In fact, even after white's offering of the exchange of queens, David was prepared to take the queens off and simply play rook c2, and here his opponent realised he was in a hopeless position. What can white do here? If, for example, king e1, then rook takes d2, and then bishop c3. So basically, white's had it here. He's losing material by force, and he's running out of moves. Say a4, then just bishop c3. So basically, after this rook c2, white was forced to resign. Let's look at this game from the opening perspective. So the opponent playing the English opening, so you might want to pretend as though you're going to play the king's Indian defence, but now, after knight c3, just lash out in the centre with d5. Now, as far as alternatives are concerned, say white did continue just with g3 here, then let's look at what Rybka thinks of this position. So knight c6 is a recommended move, and if queen b3, just the retreat knight b6. And as white, I've played this kind of position with white, and I haven't really enjoyed playing the positions as white because, you know, black has this central pressure because of that liberating d5 move, and the bishop's, you know, going to be attacking the centre like normal. And, you know, black's got a very pleasant position here. So this is what you would do. So basically, the recommendation of this video is focused on this early d5. From a psychological point of view, one of the main points of the English opening is try and, you know, have this grip on d5. So by black liberating very quickly and being able to handle this queen a4 check, that makes it, you know, a very interesting system indeed. Okay, in round 4, David Howell faced the English opening again and again played the early d5. And in this game, the opponent tried to innovate. So after check, bishop d7. By the way, let's quickly just examine queen d4 here immediately. If queen d4, then knight f6, and so you're defending your rook and your knight, and you can gain a tempo now with, say, knight c6. So that's a bit harmless. But the opponent actually played queen h4, and now after bishop c6, played queen d4 here. So this is more interesting, because if knight f6 here, then queen takes d8, disrupting your king safety. You'll have a long time to castle. What David did was actually just play rook g8 here, believe it or not, because he's preparing now to castle queenside. Let's very quickly run through the rest of this illustrative game to show that black can castle queenside. And David receives, you know, a very pleasant position now, going in for the d3 square with his knights. And white's attack wasn't that great because the queen, you know, is not really that well supported by the other white pieces. After bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, white played knight e4, going on an expedition with this knight, which didn't really work out very well. f5 was played, and now just queen takes d2, just winning a lot of white's pawns now. So after knight f7, rook d5, a very useful move to counter any potential pawn sack by white because of AB and the ability to play rook a5. So David's ruling out any nasty checking possibilities with the white queen. But white played b6 anyway. After AB, queen e8, king a7 was played. And, you know, white's position out of the opening hasn't been at all good. Black's fully equalised is better here, much better. In fact, winning. After knight h6, David played the very tactical bishop a3, counter-attacking against white's rook. So it was clear material up now. And after knight e7, just offered an exchange sacrifice by first playing queen takes f4, trying to decoy the white rook, so winning yet another pawn, because if rook takes, then rook d1 is a mate on the back row. And now this exchange sacrifice with bishop a3, just getting rid of all the other major issues with this knight and queen potentially coordinating. So white took the exchange sack, and after bishop d6 took on h7, but now black's d pawn is a real monster after d4, g3 check, and d3, and white was forced to resign. So again, another triumph from this early liberating d5 system. Let's go back to the opening just to see that in action again. So as black, you're pretending as though you're going to play a King's Indian, but you just lash out with this d5. And hopefully this video equips you quite well to handle now this Queen a4 check with the two illustrative games given. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.